Here's the thing, most people get completely wrong about fasting. They think it's just about your stomach sitting empty, growling a little, waiting for the next meal to show up. But your stomach is basically a bystander in this whole operation. The real action, the organ that's quietly running the most complicated energy switchover your body knows how to do, it is your liver. And over the course of 24 hours without food, that one organ goes through more metabolic gear shifts than a sports car on a mountain road. So buckle up, because what your liver actually does when you stop eating is genuinely wild. Let's start at hour zero. You just finished your last meal. Your body is doing what it always does after eating, absorbing nutrients, spiking insulin, and telling your liver to store whatever it can. Glucose gets packed away as glycogen, fats get processed, and everything feels fine. Normal. Boring even. But the moment digestion wraps up and insulin starts to fall, the liver gets a very different memo. Instead of storing, it's time to start releasing. The liver flips from being a warehouse into being a supply depot, and it does this almost automatically, like it's been waiting for the signal. This is the part nobody talks about at the dinner table. Within the first few hours of your fast, usually somewhere between 3 and 6 hours in, depending on what and how much you ate, your liver starts breaking down its glycogen stores. Glycogen is basically glucose that's been bundled up and tucked away for exactly this kind of situation. Think of it as your liver's short-term backup generator. The grid goes down, meaning food stops coming in and the generator kicks on. Your liver starts releasing glucose into your bloodstream at a carefully managed pace, keeping your blood sugar stable enough that your brain stays online and you can function like a normal human being. This is why most people don't even notice they're fasting in the early hours. The liver is handling it. Quietly, efficiently, no drama. But here's where it gets interesting. That glycogen stash, it's not unlimited. The liver can hold roughly 100 grams of glycogen, give or take depending on the person. Muscle glycogen exists too, but muscles are selfish, they keep their glycogen for their own use and don't donate it to the blood sugar cause. So as the hours tick by, somewhere between 12 and 18 hours in for most people, the liver's glycogen reserves start running seriously low. And now your liver has a problem to solve. The solution is called gluconeogenesis, which is a word that sounds like a sci-fi movie title, but basically just means making new glucose from scratch. And your liver is surprisingly good at it. It starts pulling in raw materials from around the body, lactate from muscles, glycerol released from fat cells as they begin breaking down their stored triglycerides, and yes, some amino acids too, though the body is pretty selective about which proteins it's willing to sacrifice at this stage. It's not tearing down muscle indiscriminately, it's more like carefully sourcing spare parts. The liver assembles these pieces and keeps cranking out glucose, just enough to keep blood sugar from crashing and keep everything running. Now here's the part that surprises a lot of people. Before you even hit the full 24-hour mark, your liver has already started producing ketones. You don't have to be deep into a multi-day fast for ketone production to begin. As fat cells release fatty acids into circulation, the liver starts converting some of those fatty acids into ketone bodies, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate. These are alternative fuel molecules that your brain and other organs can actually use in place of glucose. At the 24-hour point, ketone levels are still pretty low. We're talking early stages, not the full ketosis that shows up after days of fasting or strict carb restriction. But the machinery is warming up. The shift has begun, and you might actually feel some of this happening in your own body. That mild dip in energy some people notice around hour 12 to 16, that's often the window where glycogen is running out and gluconeogenesis is ramping up, and there's a slight lag in the transition. Some people feel a little foggy, a little irritable, maybe a little cold. The coldness is actually a real physiological thing, not just a mood. As your metabolism adjusts and your body becomes more conservative with energy, your core temperature regulation can shift slightly. The irritability, well, low blood sugar is basically your brain filing a noise complaint. It's not dangerous, it's just your system telling you it noticed the change. Other people sail through the first 24 hours feeling surprisingly clear-headed and steady, especially after that initial transition window. Part of that is the early ketones starting to provide an alternative fuel source. Part of it is that gluconeogenesis gets more efficient as it ramps up. And part of it is just individual variation, because not everyone's liver handles this shift on the same timeline or with the same smoothness. Your fitness level, your metabolic health, how many carbs you ate in your last meal, how much sleep you got. All of it plays a role in how this 24-hour arc actually feels from the inside. One more thing worth saying out loud, because the internet loves to make fasting sound like either a miracle cure or a near-death experience. A 24-hour fast is not starvation. Starvation is a prolonged state where the body has depleted its emergency reserves and starts making desperate choices. What we're describing here is a metabolic switch, a meaningful and measurable one, but one that's well within the range of what a healthy body is designed to handle. The liver is not panicking. It has a playbook for exactly this situation, and it's running it smoothly. That said, the experience is genuinely different for different people, and the changes are real. This isn't nothing. Your body is doing something significant over those 24 hours, and most of it starts right there in your liver, hours before you even realize you're in it. While your liver is busy running that whole metabolic switchover, something else is happening that most fasting content completely glosses over. Your gut and your brain are having their own conversation, and it's a weird one. Tense in some moments, surprisingly calm in others, and occasionally a little dramatic. Understanding what's actually going on in both of those systems during a 24-hour fast explains a lot of the strange things you feel. The hunger that suddenly disappears, the stomach sounds that come out of nowhere, the brain fog that hits and then lifts, the mood swings that seem completely out of proportion to just skipping a meal. None of it is random. All of it makes sense once you know what's driving it. Let's start with your gut, because the moment food stops arriving, it doesn't just sit there waiting quietly. It reorganizes. Your digestive system is constantly calibrated around incoming food. When there's food in the pipeline, it releases hormones to break it down, move it along, and signal fullness and satisfaction to the brain. When food stops coming in, those hormone signals shift fast. Peptide Y drops. G, L, P, 1 drops. The gut-derived signals that were telling your brain, we're good, everything's handled, start going quiet. And in their place, ghrelin starts talking louder. Ghrelin is the hormone most people associate with hunger, and here's the thing that surprises almost everyone. It doesn't just keep rising steadily the whole time you're fasting. It spikes in waves. Those waves are largely tied to your usual meal times. Your body runs on a biological clock, and that clock has learned your habits. If you normally eat breakfast at 8, your ghrelin starts climbing around 7:50, anticipating what's coming. Skip breakfast, and that spike hits anyway, peaks, and then if you don't eat, it actually comes back down on its own. This is why hunger during a fast doesn't feel like a straight upward line. It feels like waves. It gets intense, you distract yourself, it backs off. An hour later, it's back. This isn't weakness or lack of discipline, it's your circadian system running its usual script and getting confused that the food isn't showing up on schedule. Now here's something that genuinely surprises people when they first hear it. Your gut has its own cleaning cycle that only runs when you're not eating. It's called the migrating motor complex, and it's essentially a sweeping wave of muscular contractions that moves through your stomach and small intestine roughly every 90 minutes during a fasted state. Its job is to push leftover debris, bacteria, and digestive residue further down the tract. Basically, housekeeping. This is where those loud stomach sounds often come from during a fast. The technical term for those sounds is borborygmi, which is one of the most satisfying words in medicine, and they're not a distress signal. They're your gut doing maintenance work it doesn't get to do when it's constantly processing food. Some people also notice changes in bowel patterns during or after a fast for exactly this reason. The gut's motility changes when it's not busy digesting, and depending on the person and the duration, that can mean things move a little differently for a day or two. Now let's talk about your brain, because this is where things get genuinely interesting and occasionally frustrating. In the early hours of a fast, your brain is still running primarily on glucose, and as long as your liver is supplying it adequately, which we covered in the last section, your brain stays functional. But there's a window. Roughly that hour 10 to 16 range where some people hit real cognitive friction, difficulty focusing, mild irritability, a kind of low-level restlessness that makes it hard to settle on a task. This isn't imaginary. When blood glucose dips even slightly and the alternative fuel supply, meaning ketones, isn't fully ramped up yet, the brain does notice. It's not in crisis, but it's not operating at peak comfort either. That's the gap. And for some people, that gap barely registers, while for others, it feels like trying to think through wet cement. What pulls you out of it, at least for most people who push past that window, is the stress hormone piece. Cortisol and norepinephrine both rise during a fast. That sounds alarming, but in moderate amounts, these hormones actually sharpen focus and raise alertness. They're part of why our ancestors could hunt effectively while hungry rather than just lying down and waiting for food to appear. Pair that with ketones starting to flow more freely after the 16 to 18-hour mark, and a meaningful number of people report a shift into something that feels like clarity. Not euphoria, not some mystical state, just a sense of quiet focus and reduced mental noise. Whether that's the ketones providing a steady fuel source, the cortisol sharpening attention, or simply the absence of post-meal blood sugar crashes is genuinely hard to separate. It's probably all three. And here's the part that ties all of this together in a way that actually matters for how you experience a fast day to day. Your gut and your brain are not separate systems having separate experiences. They are in constant communication through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a bidirectional highway made up of neural signals, hormones, and immune messengers traveling in both directions. When your gut's hormone signals shift during a fast, your brain feels it emotionally before you can even articulate why you're unsettled or edgy. When your brain registers stress or low mood, the gut responds with changes in motility and sensitivity. This is why fasting can sometimes make people feel anxious or low in a way that doesn't quite match how hungry they actually are. And it's also why some people find genuine calm once that initial transition passes, the gut settles, the hormonal noise quiets, and the brain follows. So here's the practical bottom line on all of this. A 24-hour fast genuinely moves the needle in your gut, your hormones, and your brain chemistry. That's not hype, it's biology. But the experience varies enormously from person to person based on your metabolic health, your sleep, your stress levels, and what your body is used to. If you're curious about fasting, start slow. Pay attention to your own signals, and don't treat someone else's experience as the template for yours. If something feels off, especially dizziness, heart palpitations, or significant distress, that's your body sending a real message, not just a scheduled ghrelin wave. Respect the signal. Fast intentionally. And if you want to go deeper on this topic, the comments are a good place to start that conversation.